everyone. In today's lesson, we will be looking at reciprocals. We're going to be looking at what reciprocals are and how to find them. Okay, let's have a look at our first example. I'm going to use the number 8. Okay, so reciprocal is like flipping a number over. Now we can't really flip the number 8 over because it's a whole number. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and write it as a fraction. So if I was to write 8 as a fraction, it would become 8 over 1. So now we can flip this over and that will become 1/8. So the reciprocal of 8 is 1/8. Now you might be asked to write this down as a decimal. So let's do that. So 1/8 is a decimal. We're going to do 1 divided by 8. So how many 8s into 1 is 0 for decimal point now. Write a few zeros out and carry the 1 over. How many 8s into 10? It's 1. And then we're left over with 2. How many 8s into 20? Well, it's 2 because 8 times 2 is 16. And I'm left over with 4. How many 8s into 40 is 5. Okay, so the reciprocal of 8 is 1/8, or if you were to write this down as a decimal, or if you were asked what it is as a decimal, it would be 0.125. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Left with 3/4. Remember, reciprocal is flipping the number over. That's how you work it out. If we flip 3/4 over, we end up with 4/3. Okay, and that is your answer. But you might be asked to work this out as a decimal, so we will do that now. 4 divided by 3. Okay, how many 3's go into 4? Well, it's 1. Put a decimal point. Put a few zeros there. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay, so we've done how many 3's go into 4, which was 1, so we're left with 1 left over, aren't we? How many 3's into 10? Well, it's going to be 3, isn't it? Because 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, and we're left over with 1, aren't we? Again, how many 3's go into 10? It's the same, 3, and we're left over with 1 because 3 times 3 is 9. Again, how many 3's into 10? It's 3, and we're left with 1, and you can see that it's just a repeated pattern here, or it's a recurring decimal, as we would say. So it's 1.3 recurring. So if you were to write 3/4 as a reciprocal, it would be 4/3 or 1.3 recurring as a decimal. Okay, let's have a look at some other ones. Okay, normally in your GCSE exams, you're just asked to write this down as a fraction. It's just the odd times where you are expected to write it as a decimal. Okay, we've got the number 6, the reciprocal of 6. So remember again, I'm going to write it as a fraction, 6 over 1, and we just flip it over, which is 1/6. And we can write that down as a decimal if we need to. Let's have a look at another example, 4/9. Okay, remember, reciprocal is just flipping the number over. That would become 9 over 4. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Let's have a look at 7 over 15. Okay, again, remember, it's just flipping the number over. That will become 15 over 7. So the reciprocal of 7 over 15 is 15 over 7. Let's have a look at another example. We've got 0.05. We want to work out the reciprocal of 0.05. Now we can't flip this over because it's a decimal number. So what you would have to do is you would have to write this as a fraction. Okay, so we need to write 0.05 as a fraction. Well, that's going to be 5 over 100, isn't it? And now, because we've written that as a fraction, we can now flip that over and get the reciprocal, which is 100 over 5. However, we know what 100 divided by 5 is because we can cancel this fraction down, or we can just divide it straight away. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Okay, so the reciprocal of 0.05 is 20. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Let's do another decimal, 0.375. Again, because this is a decimal, we have got to write this down as a fraction so we can flip it over. So that's going to become 375 over 1,000. Now we can flip it over and that becomes 1,000 over 375. Now we can simplify this further, or you can leave it as that. If I was to simplify that further, I know I can divide top and bottom by 5, can't I? Which is the most obvious because they're both going to be in the 5 times table. So 1000 divided by 5 is 200. And then 375 divided by 5 is 75. I know I can carry on simplifying this. Again, we'll divide it by 5 because they're both going to be in the 5 times table, aren't they? 200 divided by 5 is 40, and 75 divided by 5 is 15. Again, I'm going to simplify this fraction. I'm going to divide by 5 and divide by 5, and I'm left with 8 over 3. And you can leave it as that if you wish to, or you can write that as a mixed number, which becomes 2 and 2/3. So we're going to say the reciprocal of 0.375 is either 1000 over 375, or if you want the simplified answer, 8 over 3, or 2 and 2/3. Okay, one last thing that you need to know about reciprocals is that, for example, let's have a look. Let's take the number 7, and the reciprocal of number 7 would be, well, let's work it out. We would write that down as 7 over 1, and we just flip it over to get 1/7. Yeah, so the reciprocal of 7 is 1/7. If you were to times a number by its reciprocal, let's see what happens. 7 times 1 over 7. Now remember, when you're timesing a fraction, you just times the tops and bottoms together. So the invisible number under 7 is 1, obviously. 7 times 1 is 7, and 1 times 7 is 7. Well, what's 7 divided by 7? It's just 1 whole, isn't it? Okay, so we've times 7 by its reciprocal, and we ended up with a number 1. So that's what happens when you have a number and you times it by its reciprocal, you always end up with the number 1. So I'm going to do another example just to show you. Let's do a fraction this time. So let's say 5/8 is my fraction. The reciprocal would be 8 over 5, wouldn't it? Because you just flip the number over. And when we times this together, I'm going to times them out. 5 over 8 times 8 over 5 times the tops and bottoms. So 5 times 8 is 40, and 8 times 5 is 40. What's 40 over 40? Is 1 whole, isn't it? So when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, you always end up with a number 1. Thank you for watching.